And so welcome to the Open Humans Community Chat on July 14th. We have a small crowd today, but I'm still going to go ahead and make announcements to it. And I think we've also planned to have some discussion of projects that are kind of idea stage or in development. I'm going to invite Bastien to share some of those. To start with, the sort of announcements of upcoming meetings. First is to tell people about a July 23rd meeting for the Keating Memorial Self-Research. This is a joint effort with Quantified Self. Gary and Stephen Jonas have generously agreed or offered to help put together a show and tell online event about self-research related to the Keating Memorial. So this is to take people who have been engaged in our weekly self-research chats or otherwise engaged in the Keating Memorial Self-Research Project to share their self-research. And the timing is that the Keating Memorial Project had been launched before the pandemic started with the goal of the anniversary of Stephen's passing to have a celebration of curiosity and self-research. And a lot of that kind of became overtaken by the pandemic and other things that happened, but we still had self-research projects occurring. And so that deadline is upon us. Stephen passed away on July 19th last year. And so we would like to do something, and that is to start at least to have these, a compilation of what people have done. And so we're inviting folks to put together what they have learned or what they did or didn't learn, but that's still learning, right? To present what they've done. This Thursday for the self-research hour, that is 2 days from now, we hope that folks can have practice talks or like share practice talks, because the show and tell talks, Gary and Stephen have observed, benefit greatly from a round of feedback. Depending on how experienced presenters are, that could be like a single round. Sometimes it can be sort of a back and forth of like working with someone to kind of explore and understand what it is that they've learned and want to share with others. The Thursday practice talks help organize that process, because it can be time consuming. It might not be sufficient for some people. For other people might not be ready on Thursday, but that's our plan. So this Thursday, we're going to do that. And then a week from this Thursday, we'll have the show and tell. And so I hope folks are able to join. Certainly, if anybody has anything they'd like to present, that would be wonderful. I think if we have too many potential presentations, we might also ask some people to present on some later Thursday and record those as well and combine those. So also, I don't want people to feel like rushed. Like, we can continue to accumulate presentations, but certainly we should do something in the memorial of Stephen's passing and not let this specific date pass unrecognized. So have I forgotten anything? Oh, there's a link to the RSVP form. So Gary has learned about Zoom bombing firsthand, and so you must RSVP to this event if you'd like to attend. You need to get the Zoom link. And so that's there. If you haven't already done it or been aware of it, there's a link in the notes, and maybe we can add it to the Zoom chat here. I will do that while I'm talking. So there it is. Have I forgotten anything to say about this, Gary? If Gary's here.
I'm muted. Now I'm unmuted. Okay. The one thing I would add, I think, is you should really consider presenting. And if you want to ask yourself, what do I have to present? See if you have a single slide that represents observations that you've made. So if you have a slide that represents observations that you've thoughtfully made, that can usually be the kernel of a really nice talk, because you don't have to have made a big discovery, but you can say, for instance, this is why I selected these observations as opposed to others. There's usually some thinking along there. And here is how they were collected. And here is why I'm choosing to show them in this particular way. And here's what I learned from doing this. And so I've just given you like an outline of your talk. Of course, you can say a lot more than that, but it's really useful to share what you learn kind of along the way to making your discovery. And we're glad to help.
Thanks. So moving on to the other meeting announcement. The other meeting announcement I wanted to make is to say that next week's community call is going to be focused on quantified flu. I'm going to, I and Bastian and maybe Gary will too, we're going to reach out and share that with others. I'm going to reach out to the people who have joined the project explicitly and to contributors on Slack and such to say, next week is about quantified flu. We'd love to have people that have been participating in the project or contributed to it, join and say stuff about like if it's working for them, what they're learning, what they wish was better or what could make it better, and really try to expand our sort of collaborative learning. I know there's also a lot of people that have kind of passingly shown interest in being involved and contributing. And so I'm hoping that by making a deliberate meeting and community meeting that's about quantified flu, we'll have more discussions and ideas. And I think with that, we can turn towards sort of a free-form exploration of all the different ideas and projects in development that I think folks might not be aware of or have heard about. And I realized that, that it would be nice to have that as sort of a theme to talk about during today's community call. And unfortunately, mostly means putting Bastian on the spot because he's unfortunately responsible for so many of these connections. And I think he's struggling to try to remember all of them, but I'm going to pass it to him to just kind of start sharing the exciting different things that people are working on that we probably haven't heard about.
I share the screen, yeah. Then I can actually show some of the pages that project says.
Sure thing. I have turned on screen sharing.
On your computer now, I somehow need to figure out how I allow Zoom to actually share the screen instead of just pretending to do it.
You have several layers of security here. Computers protecting you from yourself.
Rejoin before I can share. So see you again in a second.
Okay, we'll see you in a moment. Yeah, if anybody else, like, I know Morgan, you represent one of these too. So like we could almost just start taking notes. There's so many projects that I think we don't really hear about until they reach the stage where they have to launch or start inviting others. And in the meantime, we have this phenomenon of like one-on-one conversations or chat during community call, or like I try to not get sucked into direct messages and these things. I'm like, please do it in a shared channel so other people can see it. But they're fragmented and we know they're occurring. It's nice to hear about them. So I'm going to list yours here.
Okay.
Hi,
so
hi, Bastian.
Let's see whether this will
Morgan,
work
how about
now.
you start by like just briefly like 2 or 3 sentences what you're hoping to do and why.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple things that we're hoping to do. So one is what I'm calling my spectrogram, which is using OpenHumans uploads data from currently from this this particular Muse headset and get just a few minutes of data, resting data. Hopefully you collect it at the same time of day, the normal kinds of practices in kind of quantified self. And we would be able to get a few derived measures from that EEG and look at the stability of that. And I can post papers or, you know, links to things that are relevant in terms of, you know, what it might mean if those measures start falling outside of your kind of normal baseline. So that's something that yeah, that I'm going to put down as an activity at this point, in the sense that we're also trying to use the same hardware, but also using OpenBCI's hardware. So as a collaborative project with them, collecting more kind of like research grade data. And I wanted to ask some questions just at some point in terms of help in, yeah, taking it to the next stage in terms of what, if there are some private IRBs, or, you know, given that we're already a nonprofit, you know, have projects usually like approached a university or something to say like, we're interested in doing this, and, you know, going that route, or if anybody has advice on that, we're looking for it. OpenBCI is a different institution from us, and so because they're a commercial company, they have lawyers to review things that saying like we can't offer.
So
Anyway.
so let's take the IRB discussion and
Sure.
try to come back to it, because it's something that we do have experiences with. So and if we don't come back to it during community meeting, then we'll come back to it on Slack. But
Sure.
we can talk about that. And I think Bastian's back.
Yep.
So can you share a screen? And I took notes on
Let's
your
see.
projects. Thanks for sharing those, Morgan.
Sure.
Okay, so I think you should be able to see the first project in my browser, which is the Autistica Citizen Science Project, which Morgan, at least is with the head of the project, very familiar, because Kirsty Whittaker, another neuroscientist, is doing it, who's based at the Turing Institute in London. And the project came about, I think, about a year ago already. They started getting this grant from Autistica, which is one of the biggest autism research foundations or patient foundations in the UK. And they got a grant to do a really cool citizen science project on, I mean, here's the brief summary, but the idea is to allow people with autism or their caretakers to report as free text their daily experiences of things that went really well and things that went really horrible. So the example that Kirsty always gives is like, today I had to take the tube in London, and as a person with autism, this was horrible because X, Y, and Z. And the idea is that these data can, first of all, be collected anonymously. So that's where Open Humans comes in for them. So their whole user management and everything goes through Open Humans. So people only get, so the people at the Turing Institute only get the random identifier. They don't get any personal identifiable information of the participants. And people can then anonymously share those data with researchers. So each individual experience, people can decide whether they want to make it publicly available or share it for research purposes, or both of them. So it gives a very granular implementation of where people can decide which stories to share. And if people want to share, there's also the idea, at least right now, to have some community review to make sure that those things that people want to make public are reviewed by someone else before, to say, well, someone is trying to slander their boss here, or like gives identifiable information of someone else, so this actually should not be allowed to get public. So there's some review going on, which they're currently trying to implement. And it's coming together nicely so far. So I know that actually Katarina, who will start doing a PhD with me officially in September, started working with them this week as a small summer project, because her background is in user experience design. So she's helping actually the people who are implementing the whole thing to do user testing with the communities that are supposed to use the software to make sure it actually works for the patient community they are trying to target. So that's coming along nicely as like one of the projects that we've been working on for, I think, about a year now, since I went to the Turing Institute the first time to actually chat about the project. And as it's completely designed with the community in mind, it takes a bit longer than just academics making a website and saying, here it is, because they do, I think, 3-week-long sprints, and at the end, whatever the developers do goes in front of the community and is reviewed by the community. So it's really an iterative feedback process, which is really nice to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And one thing that actually seems to not work really well is this initial idea of just share your experience, because people with autism, in their experience they've now made with their community, cannot answer this question. It's too open-ended. If you just tell them like, tell us how your day was, or like what went wrong, they are completely overwhelmed and are just going into like their personal lockdown mode. And it's like, I don't know what you want from me. Like, give me a specific question that I should answer. And now they're trying to reformulate, even like in this very early design stage of like, maybe we cannot collect the data that we were initially interested, but they only found out luckily before launching the whole website, because they asked the community regularly for feedback. So that's a really nice story of like how their design process works. So that's one project that's going on, and that's hopefully launching, like the target would be the end of the year. Then another project that Matt and I have been involved in since the beginning of the pandemic, more or less, is a project which is the COVID Open Survey, which is done at the Center for Research and Interdisciplinarity, where I'm based. And the idea here is to have a survey that's crowdsourced. So it does ask people, as you can see, about their physical health, their mental well-being, whether they repurposed any medication, whether they had any vaccinations, how they're dealing with the lockdown. So a lot of questions, and many questions are asked as a one-off only. And the idea is that these one-off questions are not only designed by us as the people running the project, but actually by the community. So people will be able, if they are a participant, to say, I have an idea for a question you should be asking because I think it's really relevant and interesting, and allow the community to vote on it. And if the community thinks it's a great idea, this will be added to the one-off survey items in the future. And the idea in general is pretty similar to how it works, like in terms of how Open Human helps this to the Autistica Foundation. So again, people here, they can sign up using Open Humans. So we never get, as the project here, get any personal identifiable information. We can send them the emails for the survey reminders once per day and say, please fill out the survey. And it also allows us actually to give people back all of their answers. So it's not that people just deposit all of their data and their survey items for us and they never get anything out of it, but they get a copy of all the answers so they can actually make whatever they want with this data. They can analyze it themselves and see how their mental health might change over time compared to items like whether they are in lockdown or not. And the idea is also to give even then publicly available the aggregate data so that people can compare themselves to the aggregate and as far as possible, maybe even to the local aggregate. So if we can anonymize the data, if we have like enough participants from a given region, you can say, compare myself to all people in California, for example. So that's a really nice idea. And we are hopefully launching within the next, let's say, 3 weeks. So like the whole thing is set up, the communication between Open Humans and this website works, the survey is set up. I think the only thing missing is doing a bit of refinements on the website you're seeing right now, and then hopefully we're good to go. Yep, I see Matt just crossing their fingers, and yeah. It's a really nice project. I think like that what's also here important is while it's coming out of the institution where I am, it's a really international project. So we have people from Paris, we have people who are at Notre Dame University in the US, we have people from Sydney, Melbourne. I know that Natalia just wrote today in the Slack of this project. She is in the Open Human Slack as well, and she's in Costa Rica right now, but she's starting a master's in public health now in the next semester in London. So it's basically a lot of students even. There are some medical students from India, from I think Montreal even. And so it's like a really international project of people who are while some are academically affiliated, it's really more a community of people. Many of the people that joined the project come from the Open Pharma Foundation, which is doing citizen science for drug discovery. So it's a really wild mixture of people that contribute, and it keeps growing, which is really fun. And let's see, what else do we have? I prepared some tabs to remember the things. Another project which is not listed yet and that's under development right now at my institution is the iGEM competition. It's the Internationally Genetically Engineered Machine competition, and usually people do synthetic biology in it. But this year, because of the pandemic and because all of iGEM is a bit restructured this year because of it, the team at my institution, and it's all students, decided they would be interested to do skin microbiome sequencing in relation to whether people are currently in lockdown, and then do a second round of sequencing after the lockdown to see how the lockdown influenced the microbial flora on the skin. And yeah, so they have already lots of people that are interested in participating and that would like to get their microbiome sequenced. And they will also use Open Humans for the anonymization. So people basically register with Open Humans for them. And just when they send back their actual sample from the skin microbiome, they just write on the envelope their 8-digit identifier. So the data comes already anonymized back to our institute. And we can also deposit the raw sequencing data back to people. So that it's, again, you are not just giving away your sample, you also get your data. And then we hope to make some fun analysis around it and allow people to compare how the lockdown affected their skin microbiome. Which it's all very experimental, and it's a student project, but it's really great to see that for students, it's like, well, we need to figure out how to like store all of this data. And it's like, well, let's meet for like 2 hours in the morning in a meeting room and just discuss how you can use Open Humans, and like all of this problem goes away for you, basically. That's very nice. And generally, like a project that we are working on that's not really a project that's using Open Humans, but that's improving Open Humans, is a project we are doing with the people of Just One Giant Lab, the Joggle folks who have supported our work with quantified flu, and also that we got a small grant from Nesta in the UK, which is an agency that's very interested in collective intelligence. And we got a small grant to actually implement smart recommendation systems in Joggle and connect Joggle projects to Open Humans. So what Matt will hopefully be able to work on in the next few weeks is getting the Joggle pages implemented into activity pages on Open Humans so that people can see what kind of open needs people have posted. So with quantified flu, for example, we said we are looking for someone who can make an iPhone application to get data from Apple Health, and someone else could see this issue on Joggle and then say, well, I know how to develop these apps, and got in contact, and then did let us know. So this would be an easy way for us to get more community features right into Open Humans, especially if we can link the accounts so people can write updates. So they have like a small project block on the Open Humans activity page, which is done on Joggle, and they can see how many people are posting, what the open needs are. So it brings a bit more interactivity into the Open Humans activity pages, which are kind of static at this point. There's very little updates that people can post at this stage. And Matt, did I forget any of the projects that are currently going on?
Well, you had mentioned something about the Tremor Watch that you wanted.
Oh, right, yeah. So this is more, it's not yet really an Open Humans project, but it's more in the open hardware direction, which I know Avik is particularly interested in. So we have the Maker Lab at our institute here in Paris, and they have been working on open source wearables for many years, and now they have basically been overtaken by the Espruino Bengal.js because they were so slow in getting the Arduino stuff to work that now there's unfortunately already like maybe a better solution. But I know that one thing they're interested in is how these wearables can be used for disabilities. And I just saw this Monday morning, someone present who's worked in the Maker Lab on making a tremor watch. So it's basically just an Arduino with an accelerometer, a gyroscope, a magnetometer. So it's basically a Puck.js without the button that is wrist-worn. And they tested it very nicely, and they already developed the algorithms to a stage where when you wear this thing, it in the end can tell you the frequency of your tremor. and the intensity of the tremor. So it does already, they have the pipelines for doing the Fourier transformation, which I think, Gary, you had played around with a bit with Matt's help when you did it with your phone. And they basically have the pipeline for collecting the data with like a $20 wearable and just transforming the data and tell you what the current frequency of your tremor is and the intensity. So this could be really interesting to test out for the self-research projects.
Could you post a link or two, Bastian? I'm still looking at the Nesta screen, but.
Yeah, I don't have a link for that, unfortunately, right now. I will ask the person who presented whether they can share their slide deck, because I know it's an ongoing project, and I think, like, as usual, the documentation lags behind the actual state in these things.
Could you say again what device they're using? I wasn't totally clear on that.
So they have made their own variant of an Arduino board, basically, which comes already on board with the accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer. And they already made the whole 3D printed casing and bracelet for it. So they basically have a prototype that can be worn very simply already.
But for now, as far as you understand, they're soldering these components together and putting them in a little 3D printed case. I mean, it's at that level of prototyping, which I'm very familiar with. That's not, one has to do it, right?
Yeah, my understanding is that at least the board itself, they don't have to solder themselves anymore. So they can just already, they have to a stage where they can just order the boards exactly the way they need them.
They have a custom printed board already, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a big step far along then.
Yeah. And
yeah, and I know go ahead, Abhi.
Oh, good. So it connects over Bluetooth and just does the Fourier transforms locally and then sends over the data to a companion app for visualization and analysis and internet connectedness?
Yeah, right. So I'm not sure whether it's Bluetooth or even Wi-Fi, but one of those two. So it's wirelessly connected to a host where they just stream the data to, and then the host performs the whole Fourier transformation, gives you like a live picture of the current signal.
Mm. And PCB manufacturing wise, there's a few new companies that are doing really exciting stuff, making it really easy to move from bill of materials to an end product. JLC PCB, one of my favorite board houses, has a service for that now, and Macrofab also has some really exciting quick product launching services, which are really cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure where they actually made their boards. I just saw it this Monday. It was like, this sounds super relevant. And I know they already, like in the same testing, they tested it on a patient with multiple sclerosis with a tremor. And they also collected data with a Bango.js in parallel, actually. So they have data for comparison. So I have not, like the intern who presented on Monday didn't go into detail on that, but I know they are working on comparing their own hardware to more mature one. I think they also used an Apple Watch, which has like a tremor recording app somehow.
Yeah, invite them over. We can geek out together.
Yeah.
I want to get my hands on it, so when I can, I'll take a look.
Yeah, I think like Vladimir, who's the person from the Maker Lab, already emailed you at some point regarding this. I think I put you in touch at some point earlier this year, but then the pandemic happened and.
Okay, I'll check. Yeah, it's possible I just dropped it. Yeah.
Even something like 3D printing a case for me feels like a big barrier. I guess I kind of want to be able to like order something and just use it. So I guess I'm going to be interested on the extent to which you mentioned something about like Espruino taking over. Has that been something that they're trying to shift, like that they're interested in shifting gears on and not trying to fabricate things themselves or build them?
So I think they're trying to look into it. At the same time, it's a bit of this thing they have wasted, I think, like 7 years into this project already, and they are a bit reluctant to now say, well, other people have done a better job, let's switch.
They do call it the sunken cost fallacy, though. You know, it's. I mean, I'm super interested. You know, we're separately involved in a couple of open science hardware projects. and I would love to, I'd love to talk about them. I didn't necessarily think that they were, I mean, these are boards for collecting physio data and EEG data, and yeah. So very, very interested to talk about that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Can we go back like
Yeah.
2 sentences because I missed something because I was looking for Vladimir's email, which I found. But Mad, you said printing a 3D case is a barrier. And then I came in, I zoned in again when Bastian said they've invested a lot of time in this. But what was the thought in between that? I'm sorry to take us back, but I think it's important.
I was wondering if the extent to which they're likely to shift towards something like Asperino, where you can just, like I or you could order the device online and then it's a matter of running the software. But for me, at least, like any issues like 3D printing or needing to solder things is just too much of a barrier for me to get started with using the thing. So, and this is recognizing the extent to which they had to do the fabrication stuff, the building stuff. And so they've invested so much in developing that. And at the same time, that's a fundamentally limiting thing for making it something that a lot of other people that aren't connected to a makerspace and familiar with how to do these things. So I guess I am interested. And so I think we're all recognizing, like, there's, as Morgan said, the sunk costs strategy. Like, it's not a strategy.
Right.
I mean,
And maybe this suggests something for open humans or just for us all to like think about. I don't know. It's because I've been, of course, hard thinking about this for years around the One Button Tracker too, which also has a 3D printed case. And, now finally has its own, custom printed board, but very, very Arduino, similar. It just fits better in the case. I mean, that's basically, and has better power management. But I think it's all part of it in a way. Like all of this is in the prototyping. Like nothing is really available for most people until it's a product of some kind, whether it's an open product or whatever, but until it's productized. But all of these steps are so important. And one thing I think is really important around the tremor tracking is how do we think about the data that's coming off the device, and kind of locating some of that stuff in open humans might actually function to kind of wish a more productized version into existence, because it's like, to the extent that that's available, it makes it more reasonable to invest, in the product. And like the One Button product, I know this is something that should be like $2. It could easily be a $2 product, like on a key ring, but it's just like the non-recurring engineering costs to get it to that place are like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there isn't a business model that. So it's like, that's like the crazy barrier, right? That like keeps these things inside 3D printed cases, is somehow not being able to justify or create the logic, even for a foundation, to commit to these non-recurring engineering costs and kind of get it to this place where it's really. And the Arduino issue is like, for us, has always been like, yeah, it's good sort of, but it's not, it's itself not really a product, right? It's better, but it's not all the way there. So even it has like a long way to go.
I guess it's fair to say that even something like the puck or the bangle it's a lot less work, but it's still not a product. Because there's not like an app that's going to like let me obviously use this as a One Button. But one thing to consider is to try to converge on data, a type of data that comes off of that device being something in open humans that then analyses are built around, and that is a easy sort of reusable, adaptable path.
Yeah, like our idea around the One Button is that the product might come at the very end. Like once all this other infrastructure in place, since you're not going to have a company that does support and takes returns and answers naive user questions, like all of that stuff is just absent. That maybe it's like that comes all at the very end when somebody says like, oh my God, this thing is so great. It should be a product.
I know that, again, like related kind of wearables projects that we want to associate with EEG. And, you know, at the same time, like I find myself now watching like, you know, Adafruit's podcasts or, you know, video shows. And every so often they'll roll out something that's just like, wow, you know, like I know a group that's been working on something for a couple of years, and here they've got something that is available for $99, and you know is only like some small modifications away from what we've been trying to build, and you know at a remarkable price point. And it's not a product, but I know that it's yeah, I know that I'm trying to do more research on existing solutions, just because like there's so much out there that you know we have two tiers though, right? Because we've got a lot of student clubs, and like it's good for student clubs to build things. But if you want to also sell things to hobbyists, like it's really nice to be able to point to a fabrication shop and other kind of services that you can do, you know, just in time kind of supply chain. Yeah. But I this is the kind of thing that I'd love to, you know, if there's if this is you know a forum on Slack, like we've got some open hardware projects that I'd love more advice on.
I almost start to wonder, like the different, what are the flavors of community calls that we have? We've converged on a self-research chat, but maybe there is like analysis chat, or maybe there's open hardware chat. So
maybe just to underline that, Matt, sorry to interrupt, but I'm thinking like, you said before about converging on kind of some of the, basically the data, the software, algorithms, visualizations, the infrastructure around the hardware. I think if we organize some sort of focused discussion, some of the people also doing machine learning and in academia, like Edison Tomas and others who have labs and graduate students, they could probably be attracted towards that environment where there were already open hardware people, because that's a pretty big barrier for them when they want to either learn or invent, is what hardware they should use. And I know that that's like a team formation issue sometimes. Like, okay, we've got like some of the skills, but we don't have anybody really that interested on the open hardware side who can work on devices to produce the signals, you know. So it's something that could be like have a function of recruiting more people involved. That would be nice.
Yeah,
So,
I think you were saying it earlier, Gary, with you know, using some of these devices to prove a market, and then using that, you know, proved market to coalesce capital and resources in order to make something real happen. And I think that's a really good model moving forward, because it does take a lot of capital, you know, get these things off the ground, and there's a lot of risk involved. And anything that we can do to, you know, sort of prove these use cases and figure out as much of the groundwork as possible should probably bring a lot of really exciting things into reality. You were saying that? Sorry for cutting you off.
oh, yeah, no, one thought I'm having right now is that it's very open-ended, and these discussions really benefit from a concrete use case. Like this whole discussion started with tremor tracking or measurements for people with that as a symptom with their disabilities. And then like if we, you know, kind of wander into what are the general issues that we all confront with trying to use open hardware for personal information tracking, it does get, it might be that like I'm just thinking like having focus helps. I just had the random thought when Gary mentioned AI and open hardware. Whatever, Bastian, whatever happened to that cough AI thing? Did that just kind of fall aside? And that's the story of so many of these projects. They kind of like reach an idea, really exciting idea stage. Did they kind of disappear?
I think this this kind of disappeared when the main person that was driving it had to disappear for personal reasons. So I think they even got to a point where they had like some like early version of their app where they could record the data and everything. And then somehow the one person that was pushing everyone else to do work had to disappear because of like a personal emergency, and then nothing happened. And no one else felt like they were now in charge or wanted to take the lead. I think that's what often happens, that if like there's one person who's really driving it and this person disappears, then it doesn't keep going on.
I think that's a really routine story. I think that we want to say these are community projects, but the fact is they're individuals who are creating things for others, like that engage a community. But at the end of the day, a lot of projects do have that one person. So that's sad to hear, but always something to be aware of, and also to be aware of when advising them. Like in the case of that project, I think he really wanted to think it was something that the whole community was building together, and to recognize that he himself was a major driver of it. Yeah, that's there's always lots of exciting ideas that end up kind of like not taking off, and so I wish I wish I didn't see so many of those happen. I wanted to take some time at the end of the hour to come back to Morgan's questions about ethics review. Does that sound good to everyone? Yeah, so IRBs or ERBs or REBs, depending what country you're in. And do you need one? And like, is it illegal to operate without one? So in the United States, an IRB is required legally under if you receive federal funding. If an institution is receiving federal funding, then it's often under something called like a federal-wide assurance or something. So kind of like if you receive some funding, then your entire institution's research has to be IRB. Even if some of it's not federally funded, you have to, it applies to the whole institution. You also need an IRB usually if you want to publish. So there is some sort of not legal, but in practice enforcement at the publication stage. So those are the two things. So when it comes to citizen science or nonprofits or non-institutional research that wants to conduct itself, it often runs into the situation of like, well, do we need an IRB? Like 23andMe tried to publish research and didn't have an IRB, and didn't run into this issue until they wanted to publish, and the publisher's like, you don't have an IRB. And they're like, well, we weren't legally required to. And then the publisher's like, well, it's not ethical if you don't have one. And so they have to go get one and like post hoc bring it in. So yes, there are commercial IRBs that are available for people outside of institutions. They are expensive, and they mostly, their major market is pharma and device testing, because commercial like companies producing stuff also need an IRB if they want to do FDA test stuff. So that's another reason you need an IRB for legal reasons. So they exist, and you can, and I have done this. I worked with Western IRB. I think maybe Gary, did you work with WERB as well? With Western? I know Sage Bionetworks has used Western.
We considered it and we rejected it, but.
Did you end up using an IRB at all? Or because like it's not necessary, right?
Right. Well, we did a few different things, but it was challenging, and different people in the community have had different challenges, ranging from devastating, like somebody having their PhD refused,
Sarah Regari,
to really minor, i.e., like phone calls with journal editors and explanations of what we did that then get resolved. So it's like, you know, a pretty confusing space. The only people it really matters to are people who, in a sense, get paid through publishing journal articles. So if you're in an academic environment and getting your stuff into certain journals is a crucial part of your job reviews, which for most academics it is, then you cannot trifle with this requirement. You got to get it settled at the beginning. But if you're not getting paid that way, there are always journals and other publication routes you can get your work disseminated in. So, you know, it's not a sacrifice that means anything to you unless you're in that ecosystem.
I think we also encountered it with Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. They wanted an IRB in sort of the diffuse liability concerns area. And so if there's funding to do it, I think it's on the order of $5,000 to like in costs. And it's of course a large cost in time. I mean, anybody who's done IRB stuff, commercial IRBs are faster and they're not gonna pick like annoying arguments over stuff. It's in their interest to kind of just help you through the process. It's very different from academic IRBs, which are like, you get into very like specific concerns. Commercial IRBs are actually much more there to sell the product of IRB review and actually get you out there, get you done through it. But yes, it costs money, which makes it inaccessible to a lot of citizen science. It's like whether $5,000 is too much or like a trivial amount, it really depends on the context.
It's interesting that I mean, I think one of the goals, or one of the hopes, was that, you know, people would go to the trouble to collect this data at home, you know, with their OpenBCI systems, so that the group could participate in a citizen science paper, for instance. I mean, you know, like I certainly wouldn't want us to choose a route that didn't allow that, or, you know, certainly I'll pass this on. You know, there were some other questions just in terms of, you know, could there be, I mean, there's also, you know, this is somewhat separate from Open Humans, and that they want to make it kind of like I mean, they want there to be some prizes, and then there was like, oh well, you can't actually offer prizes, or, you know, prizes can't be luck based, they have to be skill based, and
well, the whole concept of prizes, it gets into like benefits or motivations to participate, and these are all things that IRB wants to review. Exactly. And one of the things I would caution is that one of the costs of IRBs is that once they lock you in to a particular protocol. Yeah. And I think it's very at odds with how community governance occurs, because community governance is people have ideas or feedback, and they want to be able to have feedback and evolve the project over time. That's just not how the IRB system is set up to perform. It's like a pre-approval, and then you do the thing that you said you were going to do, and you don't change. Right. And so there's even like setting aside the costs of interaction with the IRB, that rigidity might be unhappy. And
you know, I think at the same time, like it would be perfectly acceptable to, you know, make all the kind of results available on OSF and publish basically a preprint, you know, in terms of like, and having bioRxiv paper that, you know, but anyway, I'm using this week to ask in a bunch of forums at a bunch of different people, and I appreciate the input. Because
it's also useful to think about if there's ways to conclude that what you're doing doesn't qualify or isn't something that requires an IRB. So Open Humans no longer uses an IRB for the thing that we had an IRB for, which was allowing people to choose to share their data publicly, because that's not research. Like that is like that it didn't make sense, and so and I actually had a conversation with the IRB that's like, why are you doing an IRB for this? And I'm like, because a funder wants me to.
Right. So there, you know, certainly what I was going to add was that we were going to, you know, regardless, we were going to include a consent form for sharing the data, you know, and the you know,
But
like
that's a personal data management responsibility. So like one way or another, you need to handle that governance.
Absolutely, and there's a great resource from the Center for Open Neuroscience that I can post a link on for anybody who's interested. But and you know, if anybody's got comments about this, I would appreciate that too.
So yes, I guess I gave my own opinions. I think if anyone here has similar experiences, it would be Gary. And so I did invite you to add anything. I think you already said some.
I put some notes in the chat and maybe useful, but happy also to talk. You know, you can just ping me if you want some details. Maybe one thing to add is we did our project for which we did the alternative. We did a quite extensive ethical review on a participatory research project that did not go through an IRB, and it was funded by a pharma company. And so we just really, that was a case where we really wanted to have a process map for the ethical component of what we were doing, but we did not want to use an IRB. So that was just one where you couldn't improvise, right? Like you had enough participants and a funder, and you couldn't just be like, oh, we all know we're not going to do anything wrong. So, you know, there are those considerations where maybe an IRB isn't appropriate, but you actually want to have a formal process that's customized.
Yeah, I think that you might be able to satisfy legal concerns by engaging in some other sort of agreement that people are making. It doesn't, just because people undergo a consent or agreement to some terms of participation doesn't mean that that process needs to be governed by an IRB.
True. Yeah.
So I guess that was a fun way to end the hour.
Really
so
helpful.
Oh, hopefully.
Really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I look forward to folks developing self-research talks for the Keating Memorial, with the practice talks later this week and the memorial next week, and also looking forward to chatting with folks about quantified flu next week. So thank you all.
Yes. Oh, and Morgan, would you like to geek out about EEG stuff and any of the hardware problems you're having offline?
I'd love to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I
I'll
can find
put
you
that in
Slack.
the community notes.
Sure.
Bye, friends.
Bye-bye.
Bye.